Run! Tell all the other curs the law's coming! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. And boy, is today a perfect day to understand why I always say, don't hold that against me. You know, I understand how my show turned into the softer side of its former self. For those of you who have been listening to me for a very long time, and believe it or not, there are a couple of you. We're talking folks who've been around listening since 2008. I don't think I have anyone who's been listening since the very beginning. That would just be insane. But I think I've actually got a few people who've been listening since 2008, 2009. And for those of you who've been around that long, you know that the tempo or the vibe of the show has evolved over time. You know, when I started this show, I was anonymous. The reason why it's the Rebel Broker is because my name was never in it. It was an opportunity for me to vent about the things that really pissed me off about real estate. And I had a lot to, and I had years worth of complaining to do. And I would frequently on the show, it was these just complete rant fests about dumb, stupid, idiotic things. I had a segment I used called Stupid Realtor Tricks or Real Estate Agent Tricks. And we'd explore those. And there were enough that I could do them weekly. It was absolutely idiotic. Anyway, so the opening clip that you got today is a perfect example of that more aggressive, just angry at the whole industry thing that I kind of had going on. I embraced broadening the amount of the things I covered from just complete anger to just what's going on with real estate. That was always sort of in there, but you know. Anyway, so what's the point? What the hell is the Rebel Broker trying to get at today? I have been trying to help a real estate agent change offices. And, you know, I don't do this very often. I don't, you know, I have never I've only had one agent ever leave my business. And that person literally disappeared off the face of the earth. I have no idea what happened to them. I suddenly got a message from the state telling me that one of my agent's licenses was about to expire and that I needed to do something about that. So I reached out to him. I sent him some email messages, left him phone voicemails. Never heard back from him and don't know where that guy ended up. But he's no longer here. He may not even be on the planet anymore. But anyway, so then the other two folks who I currently have under my license have been with me for years and they're fine. They're great. So I don't do this a lot. There's not a lot of turnover in my experience as a real estate broker. So I don't have to worry about paperwork and all that kind of stuff. And the modern paperwork as it relates to real estate in California is ridiculously easy. You can go online and if you've got the right information on the different brokerages you're trying to get away from and go to, it's a super easy process. At least that's what I thought in my head. I thought I remembered that being the way it is. So this person who I'm trying to help comes back to me and says, well, you know, they're not going to let me just leave. They are insisting I do a resignation letter and all these other types of things. And I have to do this, that, and the other thing. And this is a person who is excellent at real estate. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, they suddenly, all the savvy that they've developed over the years as a negotiator and as someone who wades through paperwork, this is a person who picks where they're going to be and stays there and just goes, right? So this was all throwing this person for a loop. And I reminded them, you're not their employee, right? I don't know if you guys know this, but in most states, or at least tons of states, a real estate agent cannot work for themselves. They have to work under the license of a broker. And they are a contractor. They're not an employee. They only make commissions, right? So all of these hoops, and also this agent, this brokerage that they are currently with, which is a very big name brokerage locally. They're not a nationally known brand, but I bet they're known. I know I've seen offices for them all through the Bay Area. So this is a big name office. Tried to convince this person of all these various things they had to do, and then said, well, you know what? It would just be easier if you simply became a referral agent for us. So you just send the referrals to this other brokerage that you want to work with, and then I'm not even sure what the hell they were thinking. But anyway, they were just trying to figure out some way to keep a piece of this guy, right? And in the world of referrals, we're talking about 25%. Typically, it can range, but and what it reminded me of the conversations we've had over the last few weeks relating to the lies agents tell you as buyers and sellers, and that foundation of casual lies, of the little white lie, the if you really look at it from this angle, it's not a lie. It's not strictly a lie. I say I have a buyer for your property, but what I really have is just a list of people who are currently looking for a house. Your house isn't really what they're looking for, but I'm going to tell you I have a buyer for your home because I do have buyers, right? They're not going to buy your property. They were not interested in that kind of property. Anyway, so you get where I'm going. It ends up that, and these are all things I forget, right? The reason I got my broker's license is so I don't have to hang out with real estate agents. I don't. And here it is. Maybe I haven't said this enough lately. I don't like real estate agents. The only time I've ever taken a hiatus from real estate has been because of real estate agents, not because of buyers, not because of sellers, not even because of ornery investors or anything else. It's always been because I simply cannot take another minute having to be involved with real estate agents and brokers. So, once I got my broker's license, they were all the enemy. That was my solution. I found nirvana when I got my broker's license because suddenly every single agent I would ever deal with, unless I specifically invited them to come and work under my license, they were always the enemy, right? They're representing the other side, and it's my job to beat the hell out of them as much as possible. Give my client the best possible deal. So there was never palling around. There was never any need to stand by and see the casual stupidity that just happens day in and day out in the real estate business. But what this brings home is a part of the real estate business I'd forgotten. This is a business where real estate people will eat their own young when it comes to this stuff. Because as a broker and having at least a loose acquaintance with how this relationship works between me and the agents who work under my license, when someone wants to go, why the hell do I want someone who doesn't want to be in my office associated with me anymore? They don't want to be here. So let's let them spread their wings and go do whatever the heck else they think they're going to do. Instead, this broker, A, tells lies about what's required for the relationship to be ended, and B, tries to get this person to agree to this jacked up situation where they still manage to keep some money that this person generates. Anyway, so that's where I was over the last day, where I'm trying to help this person navigate these rough waters of real estate stupidity. And it just boggles my mind. It boggles my mind because it is the embodiment of what is wrong with this business that I am involved in. And it is so pervasive and it is so everywhere. I do not know how any of you end a relationship with the typical agent without swearing you will never buy or sell real estate again using a real estate agent. I guess if you notice, I mean, because a lot of this stuff might happen in a way that it's been hidden from you or you don't notice the shenanigans or whatever. But there is just no depths to which these folks won't sink, whether it's screwing a buyer, screwing a seller, or screwing another agent, or screwing an agent on their own brokerage or in their own company. Absolutely mind-boggling. Oh, gosh. And you know what? The only comfort I get is that, one thing we talk about here on this show is I honestly believe everyone needs to be prepared for the next industrial revolution, right? Which is automation, because it's finally gotten to the point where it makes sense. It didn't make sense when they started it in the 80s. It was too expensive. It didn't make sense. Makes sense now. If there is any kind of agent that is going to get booted due to automation, it is exactly the kind that annoys me the most. It's going to be those folks who do close more than an escrow a day. There's no way you're getting any service out of an agent who closes an escrow a day or more. What was that? We talked about this 2 months ago. This big thing that was supposed to be a celebration of real estate agents, and their big person, the flag that they were waving was for this agent who had closed 400 and something transactions in a year, 420, 430 transactions in a year. And my first thought was, how did you adequately take care of that many people? And the true answer is you did not take adequate care of that many people. And my argument would be that once you've reached half that number, you have no hope of truly living up to a fiduciary responsibility under those circumstances. I'm sorry, you just don't. Now, from a broker standpoint and a salesperson standpoint who cares about how much money gets generated, woohoo! It's time for the streamers. Pop the cork on the champagne. Have a great day. Go buy yourself the latest Beamer and call it good. But you're not doing the job. And because of the way you must be doing things, the cookie cutter boilerplate, everybody gets the same treatment that you are doing, you are automatable, my friend. So the next thing that's going to happen is an online service or some other local automated service is going to take care of this, and you will be out of a job. Do I fear this? Maybe I should, because maybe once you can, if everyone's happy with that, great. But I have to think that the folks who actually take the job seriously and get out there and work it and really look at the specifics of your property. Now, are there certain things that you need to do in every transaction? Absolutely. I call that the bare minimum. Sadly, that's what a lot of folks call mission accomplished. I'm not alone, though. I realize that sounds like me tooting my horn, but there are people out there who I know really take seriously their job as an agent in terms of not only doing the bare minimum, but then going the extra step and looking for those extra ways to get more eyes on your property, to be aggressive in negotiating the terms and conditions of your contract, to babysitting your escrow so that it successfully closes and you get the outcome you want. Sadly, that's not the majority. It's way less than the majority. If you filled a room with real estate agents and you swung a dead cat, you would not hit one, most likely. That believes that. Or you might hit one that believes they're doing that, but they're not. Because the real truth is, because they'll say, well, I've been through all the training. I've worked for Office X, Y, and Z, and I've taken all of these great trainings. Sadly, not many of those trainings actually teach you to do the job of real estate. They teach you how to get leads, retain leads, to convince leads to go along with you. And then we can go full circle and return to my original statement of the casual lie. Okay. So, man, I just got off the phone with some folks in relation to this. So this is probably the worst time to do the show. But man, I got off that phone call just so pissed off. Because, when you're in a situation like this, when you hear something completely different from what you understand to be how things work, you think for a brief moment, maybe it's me. Maybe something's changed since the last time I did this. Maybe I should check. So I checked. And I was right, which was A, comforting, but also frustrating and saddening. Because the person involved on the other side of this isn't just some casual person at this firm. This was one of the partners. This was someone whose last name is on the masthead. All right, folks. We are going to get into some things that go beyond the Rebel Broker losing his cookies today, I promise. But we're going to take a real quick break. I'll use it as an opportunity to catch my breath, and then we'll come back and we'll chat more about real estate, so don't go away. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for putting up with my rant. I always feel better when I get that stuff out. Where do you go with that? Where do you go with it? It's not like I've discovered the scumbag broker who's got some hole-in-the-wall office that looks evil and is clearly evil and fits all those stereotypes. You know, I've met these people. Perfectly nice-looking people, dressed very well, wonderful, well-appointed office, exude all the elements of professionalism that you would hope. You guys have to be so careful. So careful. You know, that's really what this show is built on, this idea of warning you, sending up a flare. Don't just take that agent who calls you. If you decide you need a real estate agent, interview a bunch and go with your gut. Because you know what? You are, right now, today, you are the ultimate human achievement. You know why you're the ultimate human achievement? Because sometime, a long time ago, some little voice in your head said, you know, I see all of us are hanging out here around the fire and enjoying ourselves, but something doesn't feel right. I'm going to go inside the cave for a little while. Next thing you know, saber-toothed tiger jumps out, eats everybody. You're the only one left. You are the genetic descendant of the smart one. You are the descendant of the one that survived the saber-toothed tiger, that figured out that fire burns and didn't have to die in flames while the other guy already did it. You learned. You need to learn to pay attention to that little voice in your head. And if you're sitting there and someone's smiling at you and going through the little listing presentation flip cards, and there's something in the back of your head that says something ain't right, listen to that little voice. Absolutely listen to that little voice and say, thank you for coming out, and move on to the next one until you can find one that doesn't make you feel like you're about to be eaten in your sleep. Okay, so on to more wonderful news. A couple of really weird ones, and I don't get it. You know, we've been talking about good news in the weeks before I went on vacation because there was good news. I like to try and be super honest about this stuff, and I was jazzed to share with you news that did not make me want to cry. Construction was looking like all the trends were looking right. Construction confidence was up. All these other things were up. The lumber purchases were up. Billing for architects was up. Permits were up. Up. All good news, right? Well, here's a few little things to bring us down a little bit. Builder confidence decreased to 68 in April. So it's declined since what it was before. Now, remember, every month we get updates to this data. So we'll have to see what happens. We know that there was a nice, big, healthy uptick in what looked like construction activity, or at least leading indicators of construction activity over the weeks prior to my vacation. So 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, we were tracking a bunch of different bits of data. So about mid-March, we were tracking lots of good data that was telling us a story that we could get happy about, that we could celebrate, we could just smile and say thank you for finally not sucking so horribly. But this kind of stuff is a little depressing. So it went down. Builder confidence in the market for newly built single-family homes remains solid in April. So still solid, but falling 3 points to a level of 68 on the National Association of Home Builders Wells Fargo Housing Market Index. The fact that the HMI measure of current sales conditions has been over 70 for 5 consecutive months shows that there's continued demand for new construction. All right. So that actually is not what that tells you, by the way. The housing market index, what this tells, the number that this actually tells you is that about the confidence of the builder. So anyway, I think that's still good. The fact that it's declined a little bit is interesting. But let's look at some of these other interesting headlines here. Luxury home listings are lingering for longer. Now, here's something I think we can all claim to have been smart folks about because we called it. We talked about the luxury end getting hit. In fact, the last time we talked about it was again last month, and I suggested all of you figure out where the luxury market line in your local area is, because it's going to be different everywhere, right? In your area, the luxury line in terms of price might be at $800,000 or higher. In my area, I don't think you really talk about things being in the luxury realm until we're probably up to $1.8 or $2 million. In San Francisco, we're probably talking $2.5 million before we get into the luxury marketplace. Particularly when the average home is going for like 1.2. So there's different places, different markets are going to have that expressed by a different number. Now, if you are someone who wants to invest in that area in terms of luxury property, that's a tough one, right? It's a softer market. But what is also interesting about the luxury market is it can often be a bellwether. It was the last time we had a downturn, and it might be again, but I say might be without a whole lot of conviction because it's not always the case. Excuse me. I've seen fluctuations in my local luxury market that really didn't make a whole lot of sense. Years ago, I was talking about the $1.2 million wall, where if you got a listing on a home that was under $1.2 million, you sold that thing in a heartbeat. Anything over that, and it was on for months and months and months and months. I had listings at that time that were over $1.2 million that were competing with other listings that had been on the market for over a year. So it can be very bizarre. It can be and a lot of that has to do with the other phenomenon we've talked about on this show that I like to call price banding, where if you cross-index activity in terms of how quickly homes sell, that sort of thing, with prices, you can often spot trends that can help you more intelligently price your home. So if you're priced just $50,000 above one of those bands where it goes from super active to almost no activity, for instance, if you came to me and you said, I want to sell my house and I want to list it for $1.35 million or $1.25 million, I'd say no, do it for 1.2 or 1.999. Because there was clearly something going on there, and the holding costs would more than pay for the difference, right, in terms of getting that property sold. Now, luxury real estate, according to this article across the country, this is from Realty Biz, across the country are slowing down. So not just the areas we were talking about before. This is an interesting signpost to put in the back of your head because remember, we were talking about how this was hitting New York. We were seeing a lot of luxury stuff that was getting hit in New York, and that softness has expanded into the lower ends of the market in New York. We saw this in Miami, and we kind of explained that with a lot of weird things going on in Miami in terms of some offshore things that were happening where a lot of luxury real estate was being bought by these third parties with illicit funds. We talked about that last year, so that could explain it. But now we have seen that this is mushroomed, and this is one of the things I wanted to continue to point out. Because if we started to see it become a more general thing, that might be an indicator to us that we're seeing the market in general starting to soften. Luxury real estate across the country are showing a slowdown with a growing number of property listings lingering on the market. As a result, some sellers have begun to reduce their asking prices in the hopes of a fast sale, but others are holding out for a better price, even if it means waiting years rather than months. Quote, in most cases, my sellers don't have to sell, according to a real estate professional in Utah. The most expensive luxury homes spent a median of 134 days on the market compared to 100 days for all luxury markets or all luxury homes. Meanwhile, the typical home spent just 53 days on the market. And I've seen that number vary widely depending on where you are. So we're continuing to see a softening in the luxury market. We just need to figure out and keep an eye on this one. If that's happening in your luxury market, in your local area, is that the case? Now, a really quick survey of my area, which is Santa Clara County, and I'm going with the whole county here. And this is something you can do with your real estate professional. And what I usually look at most commonly is the sales price to list price ratio and the days to sell on average. You can get some very interesting crossovers in data for that kind of stuff. So by doing this just for Santa Clara County, and of course, Santa Clara County is huge. So if you're looking to analyze specific areas, you'd want to drill down. In this case, what I've done is only looked at homes that sold for over $1 million. That's not asking price. That's what it actually sold for. And what I'm seeing is a big ramp up. Now, we kind of peaked back in, that would be November of 2016, where we saw homes on average selling for 111.4% of asking price for those homes that sold over asking price. What's interesting is that same month, the average days on market was only 11 days, less than 2 weeks. What's funny is just 2 months later in January, we were seeing 70 days and we were seeing homes going for 95%. So below asking on average on those luxury properties. But then things really started to rocket up. In February, we saw prices go up to about 98% of asking price. We saw, and 38 days average in terms of time on market. And then everything went, in March, everything just took a rocket ship. So over 100%. At this point, what I'm seeing is 100.7. And then in April so far, what we've seen is 108% of asking price. So we're not really seeing the softness here in my market that we're seeing in a lot of other markets. If I look at backward trends, and remember, the best way to look at trends like this is to do month on month. So April of 2017 compared to April of 2016, for instance. Now, if we look at April of 2016, we are beating April of 2016. It's 8 days. It might be smarter to go with March since things aren't finished yet, which we're not doing as well this last March as we did the year before. It was 4 days to get a home sold in March of last year, and things were a little over 105%. If we go to compare that to today, to March of this year, 2017, it's not as good. But if you look at this over the long term, it does tend to be trending downward with a few interesting peaks. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that. I consider my local marketplace, particularly the Santa Clara County marketplace, to be one of those ones where if things start to drop here, and maybe that's my bias. Maybe my personal bias is that I see my market as very relevant, where it's not to a lot of people. But I put it in the same bucket as I put places like New York and Los Angeles and Phoenix to a big degree now, just because of what's happening there. But so we'll see. It looks like a softening compared to the same time last year. You could absolutely call it that. But given what we're seeing so far this month in April, if we see a rocket ship in terms of prices going up, and that's likely to happen. Inventory is still challenging. And again, these are all things you'll want to track in your local marketplace to see what makes sense. Okay, I had one other interesting thing that I thought you guys should know about, and that is something you never hear from Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae is usually the good story, folks. They want everyone to be smiling about the marketplace. They came out with the statement, meaningful economic growth appears unlikely in 2017. So it has a very modest economic growth forecast. They had their economic growth forecast steady in April at 2% for the year, saying policy changes that could result in meaningful economic growth seem unlikely for this year, according to the company's Economic and Strategic Research Group's April 2017 Economic and Housing Outlook. The outlook explains that while confidence among consumers and in the industry is currently high, near-term risk of a potential government shutdown could bring confidence levels down. Okay, I get that. But that's not happened before. For those of you who have been through government shutdowns, I can recall 3, one a long time ago, and then 2 within the last, 8 years. I can remember one a couple of years ago, where all that seemed to be happening was the administration wanted to make sure everyone, quote unquote, felt the pain. So while supposedly the government had a shutdown, they actually went to the trouble of having park rangers who would normally not even be there go and guard a lot of the things in Washington, D.C. to prevent tourists from going to them. There was a barrier put around for those of you who pay attention to this news, this kind of junk. This is exactly the kind of crap that gets tossed around. But they had put a barrier around the Vietnam Memorial and had park rangers there where there usually are not park rangers, stopping people from being able to walk the extra 5 feet to go and actually face the monument. It was a ridiculous attempt to, quote, make people feel the pain of a government shutdown. And the reality is most of the news that came out after the shutdown was, we're all doing okay. So the amount of emphasis they're putting on the effect of a potential government shutdown, I don't think is borne out by history. So if there's those of you out there who disagree with me, I do not think that any actual government shutdown is going to have much of an effect. I think if things happen that have been moving one way or the other over the last few months happens that's perceived as negative, they might just blame it on a shutdown. But frankly, I'm not seeing it. Last month, Fannie Mae announced it would be taking a wait-and-see approach to some of President Trump's policies. Quote, our economic forecast remains unchanged in April as we continue to await details on the new administration's plans. We're intrigued by the disparity between elevated consumer and business optimism and signs of decelerating first quarter economic growth. However, we expect growth to rebound this quarter as special factors that weighed on growth partially unwind. So as usual, I'll include this for you in the show notes. You can go ahead and check these out for yourself, see what you think. I'm not sure that growth being unlikely or meaningful growth being unlikely in 2017 necessarily is something that we need to worry about based on what they're suggesting. There are interesting things that may come down the pike from the Trump administration. I have stopped. I know for a while there, every time any kind of a peep came out about what they might do, I was sharing it here on the show. But I found that it was kind of pointless because a lot of this stuff wasn't getting any traction and wasn't going anywhere. We've talked about changes to Dodd-Frank. We've talked about all these various things. So now I'm waiting till something actually gets proposed and approved by one side of the Congress or the other, either the Senate or the House. Once something starts to get some traction, I'll start to point it your way and see if it impacts what we might be thinking in terms of real estate investments. But until then, forget it. Finally, and I realized that was supposed to be the last thing we chatted about, I absolutely wanted to mention interest rates because things are not happening the way all of the pundits seem to say it was going to happen. Now, one thing we've talked about on this show is that the Fed does not directly affect interest rates. And we keep proving that. Every single time they've raised the rates, it's gone up based on the emotional uncertainty principle that we've talked about. And then over the following weeks, it has tended to go down. Again, that is what is happening. In fact, we have seen the lowest rates of 2017 within the last couple of weeks. There's been no change from yesterday, but the current 30-year fixed rate mortgage is at 4.04. And it was below 4% for a little while last week. The 15-year fixed rate mortgage is at 3.27. The FHA 30-year fixed is at 3.75. The jumbo 30-year fixed is at 4.31. The 5/1 adjustable rate mortgage is at 3.07. So all of these numbers are starting to head in the right direction in terms of what we would like in terms of borrowing money. It'll be interesting to see how these things pan out. And again, I think it brings home this idea that everyone is spending so much time focusing on the interest rate, and I honestly don't think the interest rate is going to creep up to what I would call a critical mass point. Everyone wants to – there are still articles coming out today that interest rates are suppressing buyers from buying, and that is that you have to be disconnected from your brain to really be coming to a conclusion that anything negative you see in the real estate market right now is related to interest rates. It makes no freaking sense at all. Why some folks are still saying that, I have no idea. Just look at the numbers yourself. Look at the historical interest rates. Look at that compared to what's been going on with sales, and you can honestly say nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. And in fact, we've seen rates much higher than they are now and seen ridiculously high levels of activity in terms of buyers. So shut up, everyone, about how much interest rates are hurting you, because they're not. The number we need to figure out, which is what we've talked about on the show before, is what is that critical mass? What is that interest rate that starts that very first thing? And that very first thing is, holy crap, we should get a loan because it looks like it's going to go even higher, right? That's the number. And once that starts happening, you start to see a rise in the number of people who are trying to buy, and people start modifying their searches to find more houses that fit their needs. You start to get a little bit of a frenzy going on when people get very afraid. And I think two things have to happen. I think it has to reach a magic number, and I don't know what that is. It might be 5%. Once people actually see a 5 at the beginning of that interest rate, that could be it. But it needs to be not only a thing where it hits a certain number, but then it needs to be this crazy jump. It needs to be, wow, we're at 5% and suddenly we're at 4.5. It has to be this sense of big movements, I think, that will really push people. But again, we don't want that. That is not good. I think unfortunately interest rates have to go up for us to achieve some level of healthy. What really needs to happen is we need more houses. I think that incurring more debt and higher debt at higher interest rates is bad for us. As I keep saying, it's not about creating more buyers. It's about facilitating more homes on the market. So there you go. All right, folks. I hope it has not been a horribly burdening experience to just listen to me rant for the first half of the show. And I hope some of this other data is interesting to rattle around in your head. As always, the hope is that you walk away with far more value in terms of what we talked about rather than the time compared to the time that you spent listening to the show, and hope we achieve that for you today. Thanks again for listening. I'll talk to you all next time.